There are moments in life when our relationship with money becomes a mirror, not a mirror made of glass, but a mirror made of choices, fears, desires, and the hidden architecture of our inner life. When we look into this mirror, we often discover that money itself is not the true subject of our concern. We realize that the real tension lies in what money symbolizes within us: security, power, identity, freedom, recognition, or the fragile sense of being in control of our destinies. This is where Maimonides' lesson begins, not with the coins in one's hand, but with the deeper forces that cause a human being to cling, to fear, to crave, and to confuse the means with the ends. Human beings live in a world shaped by necessity. We work, we trade, we save, we lose, we earn again. Money seems to govern the rhythm of daily existence. Yet despite its centrality, few people ever stop to ask the essential questions: what is money for? What does it do to the mind? How does it shape the moral life? And when does it quietly enslave the very person it was meant to serve? Throughout history, people have argued endlessly about whether wealth is a blessing or a burden, whether the pursuit of prosperity elevates or corrupts the soul. But Maimonides teaches that such binary thinking clouds the issue. The question is not whether money is good or evil. The question is how the human being relates to it and what place it occupies in the hierarchy of one's values. The drama of our financial life unfolds not in the marketplace, but in the inner chambers of the heart. Many experience money as a source of anxiety. They fear not having enough. They fear losing what they have. They fear wasting their potential or living with regret. Others pursue wealth tirelessly, imagining that abundance will settle all the unresolved tensions within them. But money cannot heal loneliness. It cannot erase shame. It cannot replace wisdom. It cannot grant meaning. It cannot fill the space where truth and virtue should dwell. Maimonides understood this with absolute clarity. Money is a tool, and only the wise know how to hold a tool without letting it reshape their character. Yet the human dilemma is complicated by another dimension. We live in a time when the entire world constantly measures worth in financial terms. Success is often equated with income. Status is tied to possessions. The visible replaces the invisible. The measurable replaces the immeasurable. Under such pressure, even the sincere seeker may lose sight of what truly matters. The search for stability becomes a pursuit of excess. The pursuit of excess becomes an addiction to comparison, and comparison becomes the silent thief of peace. Maimonides saw that the inner life of a person becomes distorted when external goods are turned into ultimate goods. When wealth ceases to be a means and becomes an end in itself, the soul slowly forgets its own purpose. Instead of walking toward truth, it circles endlessly around desire. Instead of mastering the self, it becomes mastered by impulses that were never meant to guide a thoughtful life. And instead of cultivating virtue, it cultivates a restless dissatisfaction that no amount of gain can quiet. At the same time, it would be a mistake to imagine that Maimonides advocated poverty as a spiritual ideal. He was a physician, a legal scholar, a philosopher who understood the practical structure of life. He knew that human flourishing depends on a certain degree of material stability. He wrote that poverty can crush a person's spirit, limiting their capacity for study, virtue, and contemplation. Thus, he never glorified deprivation. Instead, he pointed to a balanced vision in which material well-being supports, rather than replaces, the higher pursuits of the mind and soul. This balance, however, is far more subtle than it seems. To achieve it, a person must cultivate an inner strength, the ability to desire without being ruled by desire, to possess without being possessed, to use without becoming dependent. Most people try to solve their financial dilemmas by adjusting the external world. They save more, earn more, or change careers. But Maimonides directs us inward, to the realm where the true transformation must occur. If the heart is unbalanced, no gain will feel sufficient. If the mind is unclear, no plan will bring peace. And if one's purpose is confused, every success will feel strangely hollow. There is also a deeper tension at play. Money touches nearly every decision we make, yet it is rarely examined with philosophical honesty. People speak of budgets, debts, profits, and investments, but seldom of virtue, moderation, or meaning in the context of wealth. They treat money as a mechanical issue, detached from the moral life. Maimonides rejects this division entirely. For him, ethical clarity and rational understanding must govern even the most mundane aspects of living. If a person cannot handle material goods with wisdom, how can they hope to handle the more delicate riches of knowledge, love, or spiritual insight? This brings us to the heart of the human dilemma. We seek prosperity, yet we fear its consequences. We desire financial freedom, yet we suspect that freedom might come at the price of losing ourselves. We long for stability, yet we build identities on foundations that shift with every economic change. And when the inevitable uncertainties of life arise, we are left wondering whether our relationship with money has strengthened us or weakened us. Maimonides proposes a different way. Not withdrawal from the world, but clarity within it. Not rejection of wealth, but mastery over one's impulses. Not contempt for material goods, but a disciplined ordering of one's priorities. He invites us to see money as an instrument in the orchestra of life, powerful but dangerous when played without discernment. Used wisely, it supports harmony. Used foolishly, it produces dissonance. To change one's relationship with money, one must change one's relationship with desire, fear, purpose, and self-understanding. This is where the true journey begins. It is not a journey of acquisition, but of alignment. Not a journey of financial technique, but of ethical vision. Not a journey of external gain, but of interior refinement. And so we arrive at the threshold of Maimonides' lesson. He offers a path in which prosperity and purpose are not enemies, but companions. A path in which wealth does not dominate the soul, but serves it. A path in which the dignity of the person is not measured by possessions, but by wisdom, virtue, and the clarity of one's inner life. If one can understand this, then the very meaning of prosperity changes. To understand Maimonides' lesson about money, we must turn to the intellectual and spiritual universe that shaped his thought. Maimonides was not merely a legal scholar or philosopher. He was a profound observer of the human condition. He studied the complexity of desire, the fragility of human judgment, and the subtle ways in which external goods influence the interior life. His vision was rooted in scripture, refined by logic, and expressed through the clarity of a physician who understood the ailments of both body and soul. One of Maimonides' central insights appears in his exploration of the golden mean. Borrowing from Aristotle, yet transforming the idea through Jewish ethical thought, he taught that the moral life requires balance, moderation, and the disciplined shaping of one's character. Virtue lies neither in excess nor in deficiency, but in the equilibrium that allows a person to live wisely, humanely, and purposefully. In the context of money, this means that both greed and needless deprivation distort the soul. Each extreme pulls the person away from clarity, either through indulgence or through self-inflicted scarcity. This principle is seen throughout his works. In the 8 chapters, Maimonides emphasizes the cultivation of healthy desires and warns against allowing uncontrollable impulses to dictate one's choices. He understood that wealth, because of its perceived power, often becomes a magnet for such impulses. The human mind can easily mistake financial gain for existential fulfillment. For Maimonides, such confusion is the seed of spiritual disorder. Yet Maimonides did not view material prosperity as inherently negative. In the Mishneh Torah, he repeatedly acknowledges that financial stability enables the pursuit of higher goals. A person burdened by constant economic fear cannot easily study, practice charity, or develop the intellectual openness needed for spiritual contemplation. He wrote that a minimal degree of comfort is essential for the flourishing of virtue. In this sense, wealth becomes a support to wisdom, not an adversary to it. Still, the boundary between support and distraction is thin. Maimonides warns that the human tendency toward attachment can turn even legitimate blessings into sources of spiritual danger. When one becomes absorbed in the pursuit of wealth, the mind shifts away from truth, wisdom, and the more enduring forms of happiness. The danger is not external. The danger lies in the misalignment of inner priorities. Money, which should serve as a tool, becomes elevated to the status of a purpose. And when a tool becomes a purpose, the soul becomes disoriented. This concern is reflected in Maimonides' interpretation of biblical commandments. He writes that the Torah does not oppose wealth itself, but the corruption of values that often accompanies it. The commandment to give charity, for example, is not merely an economic instruction, but a training ground for character. Through generosity, the individual loosens the grip of possessiveness, cultivates empathy, and acknowledges the deeper unity of humanity. In this way, giving becomes an antidote to the ego's tendency to isolate itself behind walls of possession. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides goes further, exploring the nature of human purpose. He explains that the highest form of human perfection is intellectual and spiritual, not material. External goods are temporary. They fluctuate according to circumstances beyond our control. A person who anchors their identity in external conditions inevitably suffers when those conditions change. True fulfillment arises from knowledge, virtue, and the cultivation of understanding, which bring the individual closer to the divine order of the world. From this perspective, wealth becomes a secondary pursuit. It is not dismissed, but it is placed firmly in its rightful category, a means to enable a life of wisdom, not a substitute for it. Maimonides often spoke of the hierarchy of goods. At the base are physical necessities, above them are ethical virtues, above virtue lies knowledge, and above knowledge lies the intellectual love of God, attained through contemplation and understanding. Money dwells at the bottom of this hierarchy. When a person elevates it beyond its proper place, the entire structure of life becomes inverted. This hierarchical view also shaped Maimonides' understanding of emotional well-being. The person who attaches their happiness to wealth is destined to live in perpetual instability. They will experience constant comparison, persistent fear, and an unending desire for more. But the person who sees money as a tool will experience freedom. They are not shaken when circumstances shift because their identity does not rest upon what can be taken away. Their peace is not fragile. Yet Maimonides was too realistic to expect people to reach such a vision instantly. He knew that the human heart must be trained. In the Mishneh Torah, he describes the process of ethical formation as comparable to healing a medical condition. Just as a physician prescribes measured treatments, so must an individual apply gradual, deliberate practices to reshape their inner tendencies. This includes setting limits on spending, practicing generosity even in small amounts, cultivating gratitude, and seeking knowledge that clarifies the true structure of life. One of his most practical teachings appears in his discussion of communal responsibility. Maimonides emphasizes that a society must ensure that individuals do not fall into extremes. Community support prevents the desperation that leads to moral collapse, while communal norms discourage the kind of ostentation that fuels vanity. In this sense, the ethical handling of money is not solely a personal challenge, but a collective one. A society built on justice and moderation creates an environment where virtue can flourish. But perhaps the most profound element of Maimonides' perspective is the way he integrates reason and faith. He recognized that money, by its nature, creates illusions of power. A person with wealth may believe they control their destiny, forgetting the larger forces that govern existence. Maimonides saw this as a subtle form of idolatry, not the worship of stone, but the worship of control. When a person attributes ultimate security to wealth, they mistake the finite for the infinite. They forget that the true foundation of life is not possession, but purpose. For Maimonides, aligning one's relationship with money means liberating oneself from such illusions. It means recognizing that financial tools cannot replace ethical discipline. It means understanding that abundance without wisdom becomes a danger, while modest means guided by clarity become a blessing. And it means accepting that the highest form of prosperity is the refinement of the mind and soul. This perspective does not diminish the value of hard work, prudent planning, or responsible stewardship. Instead, it places them within a larger vision of the good life. Money becomes meaningful only when it supports the pursuit of human excellence. And human excellence, in Maimonides' view, begins with truth, virtue, and the steady ascent toward understanding. When Maimonides' teachings are woven together, a larger vision emerges, one that transforms our relationship with money, not through renunciation, nor through indulgence, but through an inner realignment of the soul. This synthesis is the heart of his wisdom. He does not lecture about wealth from a place of contempt or asceticism. Instead, he shows how a rightly ordered understanding of life dissolves the anxieties and distortions that wealth often creates. In this view, prosperity is neither a spiritual trap nor a spiritual triumph. It is a circumstance, a condition, a field in which the soul reveals its maturity or its confusion. The synthesis begins with a simple yet profound observation. External goods are inherently unstable, while inner goods possess permanence. Maimonides teaches that whatever depends on circumstances, fortune, health, possessions, reputation, cannot form the basis of true well-being. Only the qualities that arise from virtue, intellect, and spiritual clarity can endure. These qualities are independent of the fluctuations of the world. They belong to the realm of the eternal, not the transient. This understanding alters the meaning of prosperity. Wealth no longer appears as the center of life, but as a resource that must bow to deeper truths. Money becomes an instrument supporting the ascent of the soul rather than a substitute for it. When a person grasps this truth, fear begins to dissolve, anxiety loses its grip, envy fades, the constant comparison with others becomes irrelevant. One sees clearly financial circumstances may rise or fall, but one's purpose remains anchored in a higher order. This transformation can be described as an intellectual and spiritual reorientation. Maimonides believed that the more a person understands the structure of reality, its order, its wisdom, its moral dimension, the more their emotional life becomes balanced and stable. Understanding brings alignment, and alignment brings peace. Wealth, then, cannot provide inner stability. Only clarity can, and clarity arises not from possession, but from insight. Thus, the Maimonidean path leads not to the rejection of worldly goods, but to the emancipation of the spirit from their tyranny. When the mind sees money in its proper place, money loses its power to distort judgment. The person becomes free, free to give generously without fear, free to pursue purpose without confusion, free to use material resources without allowing them to define the meaning of life. This freedom, however, is not merely psychological, it is spiritual. Maimonides describes the highest form of human existence as the intellectual love of God, attained through understanding the deep order of creation. This love is not emotional in the ordinary sense. It is the joy of recognizing truth, the serenity of knowing one's place within the structure of the universe. It is the elevation of the mind toward that which transcends all material boundaries. From this vantage point, the soul sees wealth with unclouded eyes. Money no longer tempts the heart with illusions of power or permanence. It no longer whispers promises of ultimate security. Instead, it becomes a practical tool, useful for supporting life but unable to define it. This clarity allows the person to walk through the world with openness rather than grasping, with moderation rather than excess, with purpose rather than compulsion. One of Maimonides' most beautiful insights is that true prosperity is an internal condition. It is not the abundance of possessions, but the abundance of understanding. A wealthy person without clarity may feel impoverished, constantly fearing loss or craving more. A person of modest means with wisdom may feel rich, anchored in a sense of meaning that nothing external can shake. Prosperity, in this sense, is the harmony between one's desires and one's understanding of reality. This spiritual harmony also affects how one experiences giving. Maimonides famously structured 8 levels of charity, culminating in the level where one empowers another person to become self-sufficient. But beneath the legal framework lies a spiritual truth. Giving is the practice that liberates the soul from attachment. Each act of generosity loosens the psychological grip of possession and strengthens the awareness that money is not the center of life. When people give wisely, without seeking honor or recognition, they participate in the divine order of compassion. They elevate their material resources into instruments of justice and kindness. The synthesis of Maimonides' thought teaches us that prosperity becomes meaningful only when it is integrated into a life of virtue. Wealth without virtue leads to arrogance or fear. Virtue without stability may be hindered by unnecessary suffering. But the union of financial stability, ethical clarity, and spiritual purpose produces a life of genuine well-being. It enables the person to grow, to study, to help others, and to pursue wisdom without distraction. This balance is not easy to attain. It requires continual self-examination, honest reflection, and the courage to resist cultural pressures. Society often celebrates excess, competitiveness, and displays of wealth. These values mislead the heart, obscuring the deeper purpose of life. Maimonides urges the individual to rise above such influences by committing to a disciplined inner life. Through moderation, gratitude, generosity, and study, a person gradually reorders their desires, taming the part of the mind that seeks meaning in accumulation. The spiritual synthesis also reveals a subtle truth about control. Human beings often pursue wealth because they desire certainty. They hope that material abundance will shield them from the unpredictability of life. But Maimonides reminds us that the universe is governed by laws beyond our control. Knowledge deepens humility, not pride. Wealth cannot guarantee safety. It cannot halt the fragile nature of human existence. When the mind understands this, it stops trying to build a fortress from possessions. Instead, it builds strength through wisdom, resilience through virtue, and peace through acceptance. This shift allows a person to live in the world without being overwhelmed by it. They work responsibly but not obsessively. They plan prudently but without illusion. They enjoy the blessings they have but without clinging. They give generously but without fear. Their relationship with money becomes an expression of inner freedom. They walk lightly, with a calm mind and a steady heart. Ultimately, Maimonides' synthesis brings us to a profound conclusion. Prosperity with purpose is possible only when the soul understands its true aim. The material world becomes meaningful when it supports the search for wisdom, justice, compassion, and truth. When these are the guiding lights, money aligns itself naturally in the proper place. It becomes a servant to the moral and intellectual life, no longer a master of the emotions. The person who grasps this lives differently. They experience abundance without arrogance, loss without despair, work without obsession, and generosity without hesitation. Their life becomes ordered, balanced, and illuminated from within. They walk the path of moderation and clarity, the very path Maimonides called the Golden Way. To apply Maimonides' lesson in modern life, one must begin where he always begins, with clarity. Not financial techniques, not external strategies, but the disciplined examination of one's inner landscape. Money does not distort the soul by its mere presence. It distorts the soul when the person does not understand the forces that shape their desires. The transformation begins with this insight. When a person sees their own tendencies with honesty, the path to wisdom becomes clear. The first practical step is to place money back in its proper category. Maimonides teaches that external goods are tools. They support life, but they cannot define it. To internalize this, a person can practice a simple exercise. Each time they make a financial decision, whether to buy, to save, to invest, or to give, they pause for a moment and ask a single question. What purpose does this serve? This question immediately clarifies whether the action is guided by wisdom or by impulse, by purpose or by fear. Over time, this practice trains the mind to separate genuine needs from desires shaped by comparison, insecurity, or habit. A second step is the cultivation of moderation. Maimonides believed that a person must avoid extremes in all areas of life. Financial life is no exception. Excessive spending breeds instability, but excessive frugality can create anxiety and narrowness. He would advise a path that allows a person to enjoy the blessings of life without drowning in indulgence. This requires honest assessment. One must observe their tendencies and gently correct them. If one leans toward impulsive consumption, they should commit to thoughtful planning. If one leans toward fearful hoarding, they should practice small acts of generosity or responsible enjoyment. Moderation is not a strict rule. It is a habit of balance formed through repeated conscious choices. A third step is the disciplined practice of giving. For Maimonides, generosity is not simply an act of kindness. It is a form of spiritual training. It breaks the illusion that money is an ultimate source of security. Through regular charity, whether large or small, one weakens the grip of possessiveness and strengthens the qualities of compassion, humility, and social responsibility. Giving reminds the soul that wealth is most meaningful when it becomes a channel for goodness. It transforms money from a symbol of self into an instrument of shared humanity. This practice must be intentional. One should give with thought, ensuring that the act is aligned with justice and dignity. Following Maimonides' hierarchy of charity, the highest form of giving empowers others to stand on their own feet. In modern terms, this might include supporting education, providing opportunities for work, or assisting those seeking to rebuild their independence. Such acts affirm the sacred truth that prosperity is not merely personal, it is relational, communal, and ethical. A fourth step is the pursuit of knowledge. Maimonides places intellectual growth at the center of human flourishing. In the context of money, this means understanding how financial systems work, but more importantly, understanding the deeper architecture of human well-being. A person who studies ethics, philosophy, psychology, and the nature of desire becomes better equipped to navigate the pressures of modern life. Knowledge illumines the illusions that society often creates around wealth. It protects the mind from being swayed by trends, fears, or empty promises. It reveals the distinction between genuine prosperity and the mere appearance of it. This pursuit of knowledge must include the study of one's own motivations. Why do I want what I want? What emotion drives my decisions? What fear shapes my habits? Maimonides would encourage such introspection, for without self-knowledge, no amount of external stability can create inner peace. When a person understands the roots of their desires, they can reshape them. When they understand their fears, they can calm them. When they understand their purpose, they can direct their financial life with clarity and strength. A fifth step is the care of the body and the mastery of one's emotional life. Maimonides was not only a philosopher, but also a physician who believed that physical well-being influences mental clarity. A person overwhelmed by exhaustion, stress, or unhealthy habits will struggle to make thoughtful decisions about money. Emotional turbulence can lead to impulsive spending or fearful hoarding. By cultivating physical health, calm breathing, sufficient rest, and emotional balance, one strengthens the mind's capacity to choose wisely. This emotional mastery is not about denying feelings, but about understanding them. Maimonides teaches that emotions must be governed by reason, just as a ship must be guided by a rudder. When reason and emotional awareness work together, financial choices become expressions of inner stability rather than reactions to momentary impulses. A sixth step is the cultivation of gratitude. Gratitude reorders perception. It shifts attention from what is lacking to what is present, from comparison to appreciation, from anxiety to groundedness. A person who practices gratitude regularly becomes less vulnerable to the illusions that fuel the endless pursuit of more. They begin to recognize that much of their well-being arises not from wealth, but from relationships, purpose, wisdom, and the quiet joys that require no purchase. Gratitude thus becomes a foundation for a healthier financial life. A seventh step is adopting a long-term perspective. Maimonides believed that wisdom requires stepping back from the immediacy of desire and looking at the whole arc of a life. When a person frames their financial decisions within a larger vision of character, family, community, and virtue, they naturally resist short-sighted impulses. They invest in what endures: education, health, meaningful work, and ethical behavior. They recognize that true prosperity unfolds over years, shaped not by sudden gains, but by steady, thoughtful choices. Finally, one must cultivate a transcendent sense of purpose. Maimonides teaches that the highest form of human life is the search for truth and the alignment of the soul with divine wisdom. When this is one's North Star, money finds its rightful place. It becomes a supportive element, not a defining one. A person guided by purpose uses wealth to nourish their growth, to serve others, and to pursue what is noble. They do not cling to it, nor do they fear it. They walk through the world aware of its beauty, its fragility, and its deeper meaning. This is the transformation Maimonides offers, not a rejection of wealth, but a liberation from its illusions. Not a life of scarcity, but a life of clarity. Not an escape from the material world, but a wiser, more intentional engagement with it. When a person aligns their financial life with virtue, knowledge, moderation, and purpose, a profound peace emerges. They no longer measure themselves by possession. They no longer chase shadows. Their life becomes steady, luminous, anchored in what cannot be taken away. This is true prosperity, the harmony of external stability and inner wisdom. It is the kind of prosperity that changes not only one's relationship with money, but one's relationship with life itself.